Hey, it's Sean from Tested, back with yet another Ghostbusters prop from my growing collection. This one, for your casual Ghostbusters viewer, may be somewhat obscure and you may not know what it is. But those of us who have been working on our own uniforms and putting all the accessories together will know exactly what it is. It is the belt gizmo from the Ghostbusters uniform. So the gizmo hangs from the military belt that they have all have for their uniforms. It was actually in a holster, which I think the original was a tape measure holster. And this just sat in there, and you would very briefly occasionally maybe see it lit up. For the most part, they were just there, not lit up, not doing anything. And they did change a good bit from going from GB1 to GB2. But I wanted to show this off because it's an interesting prop in and of itself and the origins of it. And I wanted to talk about it as far as this kit. This was a kit that I bought and assembled, and I just thought it was really well done and worth mentioning and talking about. So the gizmo, as far as the actual official movie goes, it's never talked about, explained. It's just there. And over the years, much like the naming of parts on the proton pack, which was all done by fans and then kind of became part of the official Ghostbusters universe, the gizmo is theorized to be some kind of warning or protection unit for the proton pack. So it may give you a warning or be a suppressor or a surge protector, like grounding unit, that type of thing. But that's generally what it's referred to in the Ghostbuster fan universe. This particular one is a kit that I got from Ectolabs out of London. They're really active on the forums. They actually did a build of my ghost trap, which was fun. And they've been putting out some really nicely done kits. And as someone who puts together kits and writes instruction manuals for this type of stuff, I know how hard it is and how much work it is to do one really, really well. And this is one of those. And it was a lot of fun to build. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we go into the kit, I think we should look at the origins of this prop. Like, where did this come from? What is it? And the answer to that is it came from this, the 1972 Sanyo ICC 808D calculator. It is quite the calculator. And we fire it up, has that nice 70s orange glow. And it's worth noting that this calculator runs on four C batteries, which is amazing, versus the little tiny pocket one that I have that runs off of solar power. Yeah, so that's what this is. This is basically the guts of this calculator, and we're gonna take a peek inside so you can kind of see what's going on. So there is the guts of the calculator compared to the motherboard. Now, you'll notice, like, well, that's not looking very accurate. I'm seeing lots of other chips here and the display doesn't match and blah, blah, blah. That's because the ICC 808D calculator, while having the same model number, went under some revisions while retaining the same model number. So there's some brown boards, there's some green boards. The original, which is represented on the prop here, used Nixie tubes as a display. So you may remember my Nixie tube clock from my clock video. And this was what was in and lighting up the display panel for this calculator and a lot of other really early, like 60s and 70s electronics, pre-LED and LCD displays. So at some point, they changed some of the board layouts on the calculator, and they moved to a VFD display, a vacuum fluorescent display, which was what came in between, like the Nixies, then VFD, then you moved into like LCDs and LEDs and stuff like that. So this was a more compact and low power display. And so if you're being hardcore about recreating your Ghostbusters prop, this one is not satisfactory. The crazy thing about this is these calculators have gone like crazy in price, both because there are calculator collectors out there, but more importantly, because this was used for the Gizmo. So if you can find one, they're usually like hundreds of dollars, which is crazy. This one, this is a great tested story. This one was sent in by friend of tested, Gavin Ray, who found it in a box on the side of the road. And I don't know how he figured out what it was or if he knew immediately, but he found out what it was used for and he sent it to Adam. And it's just one of our fan mail things. So thank you, Gavin, for putting this in our hands so that we can, you know, show it off for real. It was a bummer that it didn't have quite the right tubes, but all the other stuff is very comparable to what we have here. So yeah, so the original calculator prop, they pretty much just yanked the guts out, and they really did not do much to it. They added this cord, and this is called the daughter board. I don't think anybody has actually figured out what this was. It may have been actually like cobbled together by hand. It was probably pulled out of some other obscure electronic device, because these guys were going to like the salvage yards down in the LA, Hollywood area. And there's like aircraft salvage and electronic salvage. You can find rocketry stuff. And that's where they were grabbing a lot of these greeblies and parts that they use for the Star Wars, Ghostbusters, all those kind of props that are just like bashed together by, you know, from a lot of cool looking stuff. So this came out of who knows what, but also very accurately replicated here in the prop. So let's talk about like the construction of the prop itself. So first, it does power up, has a nice lighting sequence, and you can cycle it through different modes, which is cool. And you can even do different colors. Like really nicely done, just simple push button, cycle through, and yeah, pretty cool. So what's interesting about this is that wiring actual Nixie tubes, which I left one of them off, and this doesn't even have all the wires on it. Some of them are cut off to be accurate to the prop. Wiring actual Nixie tubes is difficult. You need, you know, there's a lot of electronics involved. There's power requirements that are needed to power these because they need a lot of juice. And it's not practical for doing a recreation prop without driving the cost into the stratosphere. So what they did here, which was great, is they just put an LED strip behind these, which lights up the glass tubes and gives you the effect without having to actually wire them. Now these are real Nixie tubes. They still have all the little number segments in it that you can see, but they're just there for looks as far as capturing the look of the prop, but done with a much more easy to do lighting setup that uses a 9-volt battery. So I thought that was a great decision and will look perfect on your uniform belt. And the other thing they did, and I will say Ectolabs isn't the first to have done this. There is a legendary Ghostbusters prop maker, Spongeface, who has put out many, many good kits. And I believe Spongeface was the first to actually do the circuit board like this, and Ectolabs has followed suit and done a great job. Basically what they did is they drew up, replicated the actual circuit board from the calculator. And it's printed up like a regular circuit board. It is sent out, probably done like EagleCAD or something like that, sent out and made as a real circuit board. And now most of this is all dummy stuff. Like it has the real traces and everything, and it has all the real resistors and transistors and diodes and stuff like that. But these are just they're not doing anything. They're purely here for looks. They're purely here to just make it look right. I did solder all of them in to accurately represent how the circuit board would look on the back. But the thing that I like that they did in their guide is Ectolabs, like you can just hot glue all this stuff on. You can stick the wires through the back of the board, hot glue it, chop them off, and it's fine because they're not doing anything. So I thought that was a nice addition to the option, because if you didn't want to solder or don't know how to solder, it wasn't a problem. So that's nice. But What they did here is the upper half of the board, right up here, which is actually hidden under the display, is a functioning circuit board because they had a microcontroller, which is hidden under the wires here, and then they have the power switch, the mode buttons, and the battery that are actually utilizing the circuit board, which I thought was genius, and that's what's running our light setup. And then there are plugs for the display and the switch and the battery that are underneath this unit. But I thought that was very clever. And the daughter board is also a real circuit board that they drew up based on some of the originals, and then we're just literally sticking components in that match what was on the on film or in the calculator just to make it look right. So I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It actually took longer to build than I thought. It took me almost an entire day because there is a lot of some tedious work that you need to do, and we're going to talk about that. And you know, a fair amount of soldering too, even if it doesn't have to be neat or accurate or well done. So one of the challenges that both Ectolabs and Spongeface ran into is that replicating these chips, these Sanyo proprietary chips that were used in the 1972 calculator, are no longer produced. You can't find them. So how do you make this look right? Because this is a very specific, you know, vintage electronics look with all these legs on everything. So what they did is they actually designed and 3D printed the body of this. So this is a filament print, and it has all the little holes for the standoffs, the leads. And then they did some really nice replica stickers. I think they were using some dry transfer ones, which leave no visible marking around the sticker, which was used a lot on some of the Ghostbusters props, and then some just regular stick-on ones as appropriate. So filament print, pretty clean, and I know how much of a pain it was to get the tolerances on all of these little holes right. There's probably like dozens of test prints of little chips. But what they do is in the kit, they include these traditional little standoffs that come in electronics kits, and you literally pull out the elbows by hand until you have a little pile of them, and then we're using pliers to then place each one in the holes on the chip. And they even varied the depths on this to be accurate. And then you basically have to transfer this to the board and use tweezers to get every single one of those little pins lined up, which is a pain in the butt. This is by far what took me the longest, but I gotta say it's tedious, but makes the look of this totally worth it because it makes it look so accurate. So yeah, clever little use of off-the-shelf stuff and 3D printing to replicate the original. All of these are real components. These are also 3D printed and finished, and then I think dry rub transfers. And it's clever what they did for these is that there's a post on the back that you just melt with your soldering iron because this is 3D printed plastic. So you gently touch it with a soldering iron and it squishes it down and holds them in place. Or once again, you could do the hot glue as well. The electronics, the lighting assembly comes pre-assembled. It's in a 3D printed filament case, which is basically this portion here and what the Nixie tubes are sitting in. And that comes pre-wired. You just plug it into the plugs on the board, and then the microcontroller goes in a socket, and it's pretty much all ready to go. So there's no figuring out the electronics or anything like that. And they even went down to doing like these special like capacitor Sanyo components where they encased it in epoxy with the wires coming out. And like that's ridiculous, but it's awesome because it's very distinctive and it makes it look right. Overall, high quality kit. The instructions were really well done. I know how much work goes into these kits. I had a little hiccup where I had some cold solder joints on the main board because this does come soldered with the socket for the microcontroller and the plugs for the power battery and the trigger mechanism. And I had a cold solder joint on the power, so it didn't power up right away, but that was like hitting it with the soldering iron and remelted everything, and we were good to go. And I have a few little gaps here on the filament printed part that was pre-built, which I would like to see cleaned up. And it would be nice, I understand having to do it this way. It would be nice to see down the road, like maybe a non-3D printed housing, or one that's maybe out of resin or finished in some way so that you don't have the print lines or anything like that. But to be honest, that's all nitpicking, because this is a seldom seen covered up thing that's going to be on your belt, and you're mainly just going to have it lighting up to get that effect. It's overall fantastic, and I was really happy with it. And the pricing on that ran $217 coming from London, so that's with the exchange rate and shipping. And it's a lot of money, but that was very, very reasonable, I think, for the detail that went into this, the quality of prop that you have afterwards that lights up and looks really nice, and just will like round out your perfect Ghostbusters uniform. So if you're looking for that elusive gizmo, I would check out the Ectolabs. I believe that they're currently sold out. I was in on the first batch of these, but I'm sure they're going to be having more coming in the near future. And also check out Spongeface, who's been making these and makes an excellent kit as well. But I think they've been sold out of them for quite a while as well. But hopefully they'll have them back in stock soon. And this has been the Ghostbusters belt gizmo, part of the essential Ghostbusters uniform equipment, made from the Sanyo ICC 808D 1972 calculator.